There was a girl in the school who really liked him. He also liked her. She was attractive, but he wanted to keep that boundary. One day, he received a message that girl is throwing a party. He gets to the house and he notices there are no cars in the driveway. He goes to the door, knocks on the door. It's the girl who says, Bismillah walhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So this is a story of someone I know personally who was in high school at the time, at a public school, and was a Muslim or is a Muslim. And at that time he was a Muslim trying to avoid the haram as much as possible, but living in the US and at a public school, he had non-Muslim friends, and there was a girl in the school who really liked him. And he said that he also liked her. She was attractive, and but he wanted to keep that boundary, because he knew that it could lead to haram, so he kept that boundary. Now, one day, he received a message after school that that girl is throwing a party, and that all his friends are going to be there, and it's like a public party at her house. So he's invited to go, and he decides to attend because he says, there are going to be people there, my friends are going to be there. He gets to the house and he notices there are no cars in the driveway. So he's thinking, okay, did the party change to another location? He goes to the door, knocks on the door. It's the girl who says, yeah, we're out back. So she opens the door, he walks in, she turns around, closes the door, and confesses her love to him, essentially, and says, my parents are out of town, and I just had a friend send you this invitation. Actually, no one's here but you and I. And she tells him, we're alone. And you can imagine, what's on her mind. And he tells me in this moment, for some reason, he thinks back to when he was in Sunday school as a kid and heard the story of Sayyiduna Yusuf alayhi salam, and how the woman Zulaykha locked the door and wanted to be alone with him, intimate with him. And he wasn't religious at the time, by the way, but just a Muslim trying to hang on to their deen. But he said, in that moment, I knew I had a big decision to make that would affect the trajectory of my life. And he said, I remembered Allah is watching me, and that if I leave this, which I desire, which I want, Allah will reward me. So he says, it was hilarious that he quickly opened the door and just started sprinting. And he got in his car and he left. And he said, on the way I was thinking, Ya Allah, you saw I was alone. No one would have known. I could have been with this person who I find attractive, but I left this for your sake. And it reminds us of the ayah. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. The one who fears their Lord and prevents the nafs from its desires, Jannah is their reward. And so this is just a beautiful story that is about someone who lives in our time that I know. And I'll share another story similar of one of the famous shuyukh of Egypt. And this happened to many people, but this specific shaykh, he was walking down the road and there was a woman who was very attracted to him and loved him. And she was not religious. And so she wanted to find a way to get him to come into her house. And so he was walking one day, she opened the door and she said, Shaykh, my father, he's very sick and he requests that you come in and make dua for him. So he enters the house. She does the same thing. She closes the door and she says, it's just me and you, and I love you. And she even tells him that if you deny me yourself, I can make things up about you. And he says, okay, let me just freshen up. And he was smart, clever. So he goes up a flight of stairs to the second story where she tells him the bathroom is. He goes into the bathroom and he finds that there's a window. And think about this. He has two options here. Option one is to be with this beautiful woman no one would know. Option 2 is to jump out of this window and likely break a leg or both legs. And they say that it was a high story. So what does he do? He jumps out of the window. And they say miraculously, he doesn't get injured at all. And this story is a reminder to all of us that there are people who considered breaking a leg or breaking a limb better than falling into a sin where Allah Azza wa Jal will see them in that state. And the Prophet ﷺ says that the one who does zina in that moment is not a mu'min. The one who does zina in that moment, they're not a mu'min, even if they're a Muslim. And it's the same with other sins or looking at the haram. And in our time, our ulama, they teach us one of the first steps to gain nearness to Allah. One of the first steps to on that journey to Allah Azza wa Jal is to lower the gaze and to turn our eyesight away from that which is haram. And so, inshallah, these stories are a reminder to us that when we have a love for Allah Azza wa Jal, we keep in mind that He is watching us in every moment. It doesn't matter if we're alone. It doesn't matter if we think no one can see us. Allah Azza wa Jal can see us.
It shows people have different tests and different triggers are going to move them. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said, for some people, wealth is needed for their guidance. They need to have wealth, they'll be good. Other people, they need to have poverty, they'll be good. So subhanAllah, each human being is so different that their trigger buttons are all different. And probably 99% of people can't withstand a test like that. But it's amazing that Allah gives us that in Surah Yusuf. And it's almost like in a passed down inheritance, like a moral or spiritual inheritance, that you're going to suffer the same trial as the great prophet Yusuf. And who knows, like there's like a commonality between them. And these are the types of people that possibly they'll have the same reward that no one else will have in this life and in the next life. So it's ajib how everyone's test is going to be completely different.
Yeah, and everyone Allah puts in a different situation. And sometimes we wish and desire to be in a situation other than the one that we're in. But realize that if you have belief, if you have iman, whatever comes from Allah Azza wa Jal is good for you. When you are going through a time of openings and blessings, it's good for you to be in that time, as long as you thank and praise Allah Azza wa Jal. And if you're going through a time of difficulty, qabd, constriction, know that this is good for you in this time. And the appropriate response here is sabr, is patience. And perhaps Allah is protecting you from something that you have no idea about because of that.
And it's why nobody should envy or compare. Because if you envy somebody for their blessing, you have to take on their tests. Right?
That's right.
And if you compare yourself above someone or under someone, like you view them as better, or you view yourself as better, and you're trying, like they're also suffering things you couldn't suffer. They're handling things you couldn't handle. And they're a different being. Like you would never be able to handle that test. That's why you didn't get that reward. And they can't handle your tests, which reminds me of something that Imam Malik said, which he received a letter. And he said, you have so many good qualities, except you don't have zuhud. Right? And he said, so-and-so and so-and-so, look how you dress and look how you eat and look at your home and look who you sit with, versus the other ascetic people who go without this world. So they wear like simple clothes, they have simple homes, simple food, they don't sit with the elites. And then Malik wrote him a letter. He said, Allah's sustenance, even in matters of religion, are like the rain. Some parts get rain and some parts don't. Sometimes when the rain goes on one place, apple trees come out, another place, date trees come out. Right? Everything's going to be different. And he said, and that makes me not better than you and you not better than me, which is really like relieving, because comparisonitis is a great disease that really bothers people. And it's like you should never compare yourself, because you're literally two different beings. And what that person can handle, you would have failed miserably. what you can handle, they would have failed miserably. Don't even bother complaining.
Yeah, and you remind me of one of the tabi'een who spoke to a sahabi and said, and he was saying, I wish I was there with you guys
Subhanallah.
during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And this sahabi became extremely angry at him and said, what guarantee do you have that if you were with us, with the sahaba, with the Prophet, that you would have followed him like we did? And it really is true. Sometimes we say, I wish I lived in the time of the Prophet. But how do you know you would have been a Muslim?
Yeah, that's true.
And you wouldn't have rejected him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the majority.
And you see, you asked, like, how could the Holocaust have happened when the whole world was silent? Well, it's happening again. It just happened. And the whole world was silent. And one time a group of brothers were sitting around talking about the ruler of a certain country, how bad he is. Like, he is the worst. And which is, in a sense, they're supposed to do that. You're supposed to not like people who are oppressive and unjust. But then the sheikh that was there sort of brought them down to earth. They said, yeah, they're so bad. And you're lucky you're the president. You all lucky, because you probably would have been worse. How do you know that this evil person isn't the mercy? That everyone else in the country would have been 10 times worse.
Yeah, and if you were in that position, what guarantees you that you wouldn't have been just like them and been tested by wealth and power and whatnot? So we thank Allah for where He placed us.
I mean, and it's not like it's approving of it, but it's saying, yeah, it's bad, but keep in mind, you're not some angel yourself. You could have been worse if it wasn't for Allah protecting you. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, sallallahu ala Sayyid Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. If you like these videos, you can catch more of them at Safina Society's YouTube channel, and you could study with us online at arcview.org.